Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
Alright, so here's how it all went down. I've been living in this apartment complex for about 3 years now, and it's been pretty decent for the most part. You know, quiet neighbors, nice landscaping, all that good stuff. But there's this one thing that's been driving me absolutely bonkers lately, my parking spot. See, each apartment is supposed to have its own designated parking space. It's not like we're living in some fancy place with underground parking or anything, but it's still nice to know you've got a spot waiting for you when you come home after a long day at work. My spot is right in front of my building, which is super convenient for carrying groceries or whatever. But about 6 months ago, this new family moved in next door. The Johnsons, I think their name is. At first, they seemed nice enough. We did the whole, welcome to the neighborhood, thing, exchanged pleasantries, all that jazz. But then, I started noticing something weird. Every now and then, I'd come home and find their car parked in my spot. At first, I thought maybe it was just a mistake. You know, new to the area, didn't know which spot was theirs. So I left a friendly note on their windshield, just saying, "Hey, I think you might have parked in the wrong spot by accident. No worries, just wanted to let you know for next time." But it kept happening, and not just once in a while, we're talking like 2 or 3 times a week. I'd leave for work in the morning, and when I came back, boom, there's their stupid SUV sitting pretty in my spot. And the thing is, their spot was always empty. It's not like they didn't have anywhere else to park. So I started leaving more notes. Less friendly this time, more along the lines of, "Please stop parking in my spot. You have your own designated space." But it was like talking to a brick wall. They just kept doing it. I tried knocking on their door a couple times to talk to them face to face, but they never answered. I'm pretty sure they were home, too. I could hear their TV going and everything. They were just ignoring me. After about a month of this, I was at my wit's end. I mean, what kind of person just blatantly ignores their neighbor like that? So I decided to take matters into my own hands. The next time I came home and found their car in my spot, I parked right in front of their garage. Now, technically, I wasn't breaking any rules. There's no assigned parking in the driveway area, it's just first come, first served. But I knew it would block them in. Sure enough, about an hour later, there's a knock at my door. I open it up, and there's Mr. Johnson, looking all red-faced and angry. "Hey, what's the big idea?" he says, pointing towards the parking area. "You're blocking our car in." I put on my best innocent face. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said. "Was that your garage? I didn't realize. You see, I couldn't park in my usual spot because someone else was parked there." He starts sputtering, trying to come up with some excuse. "Well, it was only for a little while. We were going to move it." I cut him off. "Look, Mr. Johnson, I've left you guys multiple notes about this. I've tried to talk to you face to face, but you keep parking in my spot. So I figured if you were going to take my spot, I'd just have to find somewhere else to park." He stood there for a moment, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then he just turned and stormed off without another word. I thought that would be the end of it. Surely now they'd get the message, right? But nope. The very next day, there they were in my spot again. So I did the same thing. Parked right in front of their garage. This time, Mrs. Johnson came knocking. She tried to play the sympathy card, talking about how they have kids and it's just so much more convenient for them to park closer to their apartment. I wasn't having it. "I understand that," I told her, "but that's my assigned spot. You have your own spot. If you want to park closer, take it up with management. Don't just take someone else's space." This back and forth went on for weeks. They'd park in my spot, I'd block their garage. They'd come complain, I'd explain why I was doing it. Rinse and repeat. Then things started to escalate. One day, I came home to find my spot free, but there was a nasty note left on the ground. It was full of swear words and threats, saying they'd call the police if I blocked their garage again. I was fuming. I stormed over to their apartment and pounded on the door. Mr. Johnson answered, looking smug. "Can I help you?" he said, all innocent-like. I held up the note. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. "You're threatening to call the cops on me? For what? Parking in a public space? When you're the ones who keep stealing my spot. He tried to deny it at first, but I wasn't backing down. We got into a shouting match right there in the hallway. Other neighbors started poking their heads out to see what all the commotion was about. That's when Mrs. Peterson from across the hall stepped in. "What in the world is going on out here?" she asked, looking between me and Mr. Johnson. I explained the situation, showing her the note. Mr. Johnson tried to interrupt, but Mrs. Peterson held up a hand to stop him. "Now, I've seen what's been going on," she said. "And I have to say, I'm disappointed in you, Mr. Johnson. That spot clearly belongs to your neighbor here. You have no right to be parking there." Mr. Johnson's face turned an even deeper shade of red. But we have kids," he sputtered. "It's easier for us to park there." "Then you should have thought about that before you moved into an apartment with assigned parking," Mrs. Peterson shot back. "You don't get to just take someone else's spot because it's more convenient for you." Other neighbors started chiming in too. Most of them were on my side, saying they'd noticed the Johnsons' behavior and thought it was rude. A couple people defended the Johnsons, saying I was being petty by blocking their garage. The argument in the hallway went on for a good half hour, with people taking sides and voices getting louder and louder. Finally, someone threatened to call the building manager, and everyone dispersed. I thought that would be the end of it. With so many people calling them out, surely the Johnsons would stop, right? Wrong. The very next day, their car was in my spot again. But this time, when I went to park in front of their garage, I found that they'd put up traffic cones blocking the space. I was livid. I got out of my car and started moving the cones. That's when Mr. Johnson came running out. "Hey, you can't park there," he yelled. "Watch me," I said, continuing to move the cones. He tried to physically stop me, grabbing my arm. I shook him off, telling him not to touch me. "I'm calling the cops," he threatened. "Go ahead," I shot back. "I'd love to explain to them how you've been stealing my parking spot for months." We were at a standoff, glaring at each other, when Mrs. Johnson came out with their kids. The kids started crying, asking why everyone was yelling. That's when I realized how ridiculous this whole situation had become. We were two grown adults fighting over a parking spot like children. I took a deep breath. "Look," I said, trying to calm down. "This has gotten out of hand. Can we please just talk about this like adults?" Mr. Johnson looked like he wanted to argue more, but Mrs. Johnson put a hand on his arm. "He's right," she said softly. "This is silly." We ended up going inside their apartment to talk. It was awkward at first, sitting there in their living room with the kids peeking around the corner curiously. "Why is this spot so important to you?" I asked. "You have your own assigned spot. Why do you keep taking mine?" They exchanged glances. It's closer to the elevator," Mrs. Johnson admitted. "I have a bad knee, and carrying groceries or the kids' stuff from our spot is hard sometimes." I felt a twinge of sympathy, but I wasn't about to back down entirely. "I understand that," I said, "but that doesn't give you the right to just take someone else's spot. Why didn't you just ask me about it? Or talk to management about switching spots?" They looked sheepish. "We didn't think you'd agree," Mr. Johnson mumbled. "And management said we'd have to pay extra to switch to a premium spot." We talked for a while longer, hashing things out. In the end, we came to a compromise. They agreed to stop parking in my spot without permission. In return, I said they could use it on days when Mrs. Johnson's knee was particularly bad, as long as they asked first and didn't make a habit of it. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was better than the all-out war we'd been having. We shook hands, and I left feeling like maybe, just maybe, we could move past this. But as I walked back to my apartment, I couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of resentment. Sure, we'd come to an agreement, but the fact remained that they'd been knowingly inconveniencing me for months without a second thought. And now I was the one making concessions? I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was better to be the bigger person. But every time I saw their car in the parking lot, I felt my blood pressure rise a little. The peace lasted for about a week. They asked to use my spot once during that time, and I agreed. But then, on Friday night, I came home late from work to find their car in my spot again. No note, no text, nothing. I sat in my car for a good 5 minutes, just staring at their SUV and feeling my anger build. All the frustration from the past months came rushing back. Before I knew what I was doing, I'd pulled out my phone and was dialing the local towing company. As I watched their car being towed away, a mix of emotions washed over me. Part of me felt vindicated, like justice was finally being served. But another part felt guilty, knowing this would probably destroy any chance of us ever having a civil relationship. The next morning, all hell broke loose. The Johnsons were banging on my door at 6 a.m., screaming about their car. Other neighbors came out to see what was going on. It turned into another big argument in the hallway, with people taking sides again. This time, though, more people seemed to be on the Johnsons' side. They thought I'd gone too far by having the car towed without warning. Even Mrs. Peterson, who had defended me before, said I should have tried talking to them again first. The building manager got involved this time. He called a meeting with me and the Johnsons, lecturing us both about being good neighbors and following the rules. In the end, he said if we couldn't resolve our issues, one of us would have to move out when our leases were up. The Johnsons were furious about having to pay to get their car back from the tow yard. They threatened to sue me for the costs. I don't know if they actually could, but the threat alone was enough to stress me out. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in the building was tense. People took sides, forming little cliques. Some neighbors stopped speaking to me entirely. Others went out of their way to be extra friendly, like they were trying to show their support. The Johnsons and I avoided each other like the plague. If we saw each other in the hallway or parking lot, we'd turn and walk the other way. It was childish, but I couldn't bring myself to face them after everything that had happened. As the months went by, the situation didn't improve. The tension remained, affecting not just me and the Johnsons, but the whole building. What had started as a simple parking dispute had turned into a full-blown neighborhood feud. I found myself dreading coming home each day, wondering what new drama would be waiting for me. Would there be another nasty note? Would someone else be parked in my spot? Would I run into the Johnsons and have to endure their glares? The worst part was, I couldn't even enjoy my victory. Sure, they weren't parking in my spot anymore, but at what cost? I'd lost the peace and comfort I used to feel in my own home. Was it really worth it? As my lease neared its end, I found myself faced with a difficult decision. Should I renew and continue living in this hostile environment? Or should I be the one to leave, essentially admitting defeat but potentially finding peace elsewhere? I wish I could say there was a clear answer, a moment of revelation where everything suddenly made sense. But the truth is, I'm still struggling with it. Every time I think I've made up my mind, I second-guess myself. Part of me wants to stay out of sheer stubbornness, to prove that I won't be driven out of my home by inconsiderate neighbors. But another part of me is exhausted by the constant tension and drama. As I sit here, staring at the lease renewal form on my kitchen table, I can't help but wonder how something as simple as a parking spot could have spiraled so out of control. And more importantly, I wonder if there's any way to fix it, or if the damage is already done.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.